I'm going to do a video on gap fills. And the question comes up from one of our members, King Solomon, asks, on something like NIO, which I have up on the board here, do you concern yourself with the gap on it, the daily chart 242? So that's in, I'm assuming you're talking about this gap in here, 224 to 260, or maybe you're talking about this gap here, 255 to 288. Doesn't matter. These are gaps. And the question is just trying to understand how big a deal gaps are that are created on the daily chart. You seem to use 2 minutes charts majority of the time. Okay, so when I'm trading, I'm using the 2-minute chart. That's correct. But the first thing I do is I look at the daily chart because I want to find out where resistance is, trend lines are. This NIO has broke the big long declining tops line. It is in this rising channel like this. Oops. And it's popping up on this. Now, conventional wisdom in technical analysis states that gaps will always be filled. So here's your gap, so you would expect that to get filled. This is a gap, you would expect that to get filled. Here's a gap, you would expect that to get filled. So the problem with that theory, the convention of technical analysis, it doesn't say when the gap is going to be filled. All it says is that a gap will get filled. So you would expect at some time that NIO will pull back and fill this gap. You can see that here it did gap down, pop, came back up, and it filled the gap here and here. And what happened was when it did fill the gap is that it got up to it and pulled back. So filling the gap it does fill the gap, but and quite often it backs off after it fills the gap. It's not the gap that causes the pullback, though. It's the resistance. This is the lateral resistance now for that gap. Because you think about it, these investors were buying the stock in here and here, thinking, okay, this has changed directions, it's going to go up. It sells off hard one day, and maybe they bought it on support, and then boom, it gaps down. It goes from 275 to 115 in the blink of an eye. And so now we've got all these bag holders in here. And not only do we have bag holders, but we also have buyers that bought it at this, buy the bounce, looking for it to buy the bounce, buy the pullback, and and start trading and buying it all the way up. Everybody knows, the people that bought it here and the people that bought it here, that the market psychology is going to be, as soon as this gets close to where I can break even, if I was the bag holder, I'm going to sell it. My spouse yelled at me, said, why are you still owning this stock at $1 when you paid $2.75 for it, you idiot? And so to get in their good books again, your spouse's good books, significant other's good books, you think, oh God, thank God this is going to get back even close to where I bought it, where I bought it, and so I can break even at best, at least. And sure enough, stock fills the gap, backs off. But stocks tend to always fill the gap. Now, is that just because this is now in a big uptrend and there just happens to be a gap in the way? Or is it the case that stocks are attracted through this gap area and then they fill them? Now, on some of them we were looking at, and that stock was, I think this is it. Yeah. Now look at this ISEE. I was saying about putting a swing trade on this stock in this area. It's broken out above this resistance here at around $7. But look at this gap fill here. I mean, this is $30 from 8. Maybe this is the gap fill here, 22.5. And stocks tend to fill the gaps. So this has big potential to move to fill the gap. So that is a big deal. There's no doubt about it. But getting back to the NIO, and the question is, what's your feeling on this gap? Well, it already has filled. So I'm looking at this on the 2-minute chart now. This is your gap here. It's in the pre-market. Conventional wisdom says that one day this will come back and fill that gap, but this is in a strong uptrending channel now. And so, yeah, when's it going to fill the gap? We don't know. Maybe. Now, the gap is not here, 256 to 288. The gap is here, 276 to 285, 288. So it could come back and fill this gap here. And if it did pull back to the trend line, it would fill this gap as well. So there's a potential that this can fill the gap. But I'm not putting much weight on that. To me, the gap fill only shows a point where you're going to find support and resistance. This pullback here to the gap 275 is going to be support. This gap fill here, which actually also happens to be 275, is going to be resistance. So that resistance now turns into support. So the great thing about a gap fill, or a stock that's had a huge gap, especially like this ISEE, it's not so much that that we're looking for this to fill the gap here at 22. What it shows is that there's not going to be any sellers in here, because all the bag holders are up here at 22.5, and they want to get back close to that. Now, what you'll find quite often in this type of gap is that the stock will trade to the midpoint. So if this is 650 and 2250, so 1450. So this would be your first resistance right around here. That's where you're going to find resistance. That would be my target. If I put a swing on this, those would be my targets, 15 and 22.5, for the stock to fill the gap. So that's my theory on gap fill, and I'm sticking to it.